All right, man, here we are. It is 9:21 a.m. This is episode 20 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. I'm gonna have to be a little quiet right now as people are sleeping. Do not want to disrupt their slumber, but the sun is shining on the trees outside. The cats are sleeping comfortably and sound, and the day is full of possibilities and will not be wasted. It can't be wasted because we're not going to get it back. So we might as well make the most of it while we have it, man. All right, I hope you are all doing well this past week, and I hope you've been keeping up with whatever you need to keep up with, watching films, reading books, working on your art, whatever that might be. A lot has happened in the past week. Actually, funny enough, last week I was talking in depth about Watership Down, the upcoming 4K release from the BFI, and I had mentioned how I had been interested in reading the book. Well, since then, I have started reading the book. I'm about 60 pages in at the moment, and it is very, very fascinating. I am already noticing the differences between the book and the film. There are times where the characters have gone off to the side for certain exchanges that obviously are not in the film. And one of the sequences that I'm surprised was actually not as long as I thought it would be. Was early on in the film. If any of you have seen it, there's a point where the rabbits have to cross a riverbank, and they have a little bit of trouble, but ultimately succeed. And in the book, it actually, I guess I thought it would have been a longer sequence, but they do a good point of having tension there, why they have to cross it sooner, you know? Overall, though, very good. I am also wrapping up another book, which maybe I'll talk about. I don't know. Maybe I'll talk about next week when I actually finish with it. I only have about 10 pages left. So maybe that'll be another time. But I plan on reading The Plague Dogs next. And I think I will go ahead and rewatch the film after I read the book because my memory is a little fuzzy on it, but I remember liking it a lot. Um, there we go. Okay, so like I was saying before, a lot has happened in the past week. A lot of good films watched. So let's start out with the first one, which is a recent film from 2015. I think you can hear me typing there. Get a sip of coffee and then we'll go right on into it, man. This is like the first ASMR episode, man. Hope this is relaxing to you. Let's talk about one of my favorite filmmakers, Terrence Malick. A filmmaker who has divided his career into two halves in terms of stylistic choices. I think it's easy to see where one ends and one begins. We have his, I would say, the first half starting in 1973 with the film Badlands. Martin Sheen, Sissy Spacek, Warren Oates, one of the best. And it goes into probably, I would say, 2005 of The New World with Colin Farrell. There's only about 5 films there. There's a gap between Days of Heaven and The Thin Red Line, about 20 years. And then there's a bit more of a gap. I'm sorry, there's another gap from there, from The New World to his return, which would be The Tree of Life in 2011. And that's where his second half of his career begins, where his films made since The Tree of Life have all followed very similar stylistic choices. He's made a couple films since. He's made The Tree of Life, To the Wander, Song to Song, and most recently A Hidden Life. And I believe there was a documentary that I don't think he directed. I think he produced that. I remember hearing him talk about that came out recently. What was that called? Awaken. That's what it was. I have not seen that, but I am interested. But one of the films that he directed since The Tree of Life is the 2015 film, which I'll be talking about now, Knight of Cups. This has a great cast behind it. You have Christian Bale, Kate Blanchett, Natalie Portman, who else? Wes Bentley, Oh, Brian Dennehy, man. That was so cool seeing him in that film. Antonio Banderas, one of my favorites. Freda Pinto, Teresa Palmer, Imogen Poots. A lot of good actors there, man. Michael Wincott, of course, Jason Clarke, Kevin Corrigan. It's a great cast. It's an ensemble cast. And I think when it comes to the second half of Terrence Malick's career, his films can be very divisive. His films are like poems, very ambiguous, very lots of free flowing camera work, lots of narration. In fact, almost all, I would say 99% of Christian Bale's dialogue in Night of Cups is narration. He almost has no lines in person. So I think you're either into his newer films or you're not. You can be a fan of films of his like Badlands and Days of Heaven and not be a fan of his recent work. Although I have not seen A Hidden Life, but I have heard it is very good. When it comes to his recent work, I've only seen The Tree of Life and now Night of Cups, which was funny because when I saw The Tree of Life, which is one of my absolute favorite films, I remember seeing it theatrically and it having a big impact, and I really loved it, and I couldn't wait for his follow up, which would be the next year, To the Wander, with who was in that? I think that was Ben Affleck and Olga Kurylenko. I believe so. I remember being very aware of that film coming out and then never seeing it, and then Night of Cups and Song to Song, I feel like came out fairly soon together. Song to Song was 2017, Night of Cups was 2015, but I think I kind of associate those films together because I believe they were filmed together. And then I think because those two films kind of looked very similar, whereas A Hidden Life looked a little more different while still having a lot of those Terrence Malick styles of the. I mean, you watch his films and you watch his recent films, and the camera is almost never standing still. Characters have long monologues. They ponder about many things, some of which, admittedly, it goes totally over my head. But there is a lot there that I really get out of. Like I said before, I love The Tree of Life. It's one of my favorite films, and with Night of Cups, of his recent work, this was the one that I had been the most interested in watching and had an opportunity, of course, to watch and took the opportunity. And I thought this was a really terrific film, and I was interested in reading the. Normally, I don't really care about the reviews online of a film. They do not influence me one way or another for the most part in terms of after I've seen a film. But it's a very divisive film. You're either on board with it or you're not. And I think early on in the first 5-10 minutes, you will know whether or not this is your kind of film. And this totally was my kind of film. There's a lot here that initially is very surface level in terms of the ideas that it's presenting with the main character of Rick, played by Christian Bale. He's a character who, much like the camera, tends to wander. He is, I believe he was an actor. His character is an actor. He's some big shot in Hollywood. He goes to these extravagant parties. There's tons of women there who practically throw themselves at him. The eroticism is dripping off the scenery. He's given every excess that he wants, but chooses to disassociate himself from society. Reminds me of a film, somewhat of the parallel, but that same sort of style was a film that I don't know if I've ever talked about on the show. From 2003, I think. I don't actually know when the film came out. It's a Danny Houston film from 2000, sorry. It's called Ivan's Ecstasy. He's a character in that film who is a Hollywood agent who we follow the last days of his life as he drowns himself in every sort of excess there is, and until ultimately realizing his mortality, and morality as well. And Knight of Cups kind of plays on this a little bit, but a character who struggles to have any real interaction, intimate or emotional, primarily with various women he comes across. Early on, there's a interaction between him and actor Imogen Poots, and he finds himself attached to her, and she finds herself very distant from him and ultimately pushes him away. And some of the other interactions that he comes across. You have Teresa Palmer in the film, who plays a dancer, represents more of a sexual kind of component of what he's looking for, but ultimately pushes away from. Natalie Portman is probably the closest real romantic. Sorry, I apologize for the chair. I've had this chair for so long, and I figured I should get rid of it by now, but it still works, and I'm not one to waste money. I think I woke the cat up because now he's looking at me kind of funny. Sorry, man. Go back to bed. I'm just talking about film. But you have Natalie Portman's character in the film, which is the closest that he has to any sort of acquaintanceship. But there is a disconnect there. And the way that Malick shoots the film, it really sucks you into the film. It really makes you feel like you are really there in this setting. And I don't know how he does it. I don't know if it's the oftentimes handheld. Well, that's not the right term because most of it is handheld, but there are times where the digital camera changes picture quality. And I've said before, I really know nothing about any sort of film quality or digital in film. I mean, I know the basics, but if you ask me specifics, it would be like talking to a brick wall. You probably wouldn't get a response. But there are certain times in the film that it feels very exhilarating. Some of my favorite moments in the film were when Rick is driving in the car and we are in the car with him, and you really feel the wind blowing through and the speed, and I don't know if you can hear those birds outside. They're having a good conversation there. I wonder what they're talking about. Maybe they're a fan of the film as well. I'm just kidding. Birds can't watch films. It's talking about something, all right. God bless him, man. But it really puts you in the car with him, and I don't know what it is. I think it is the lower quality digital camera that makes it feel so much more personal. But there's a lot of sequences in the film that when he's going through parties and when he's going through these open areas, you really feel like you're with him. The camera's constantly moving and going through the people in and out, and you start to feel at times the disorder, or I'm sorry, not disorder. I guess you'd say that as well. The disorientation of his settings, of his situations. Like early on, there's a moment that stuck out where I don't know if he was intentionally supposed to be drunk or not, but the camera's above him and he's on a couch, and there's women with him, and he falls right off the couch onto the ground, and the camera kind of hovers over him in a way that felt intentionally disorienting, and I think worked so well, and really kind of, I compare it to when I play, which I don't really play many, if at all, any video games, but when I did, and rarely when I do, I feel very immersed into the setting, like I'm actually there, in a way of, almost like a virtual reality sort of thing in a way, and that's what I get from this film. I liked a lot of the sequences with the characters kind of coming in and out, revolving around Rick's world, where Rick is somebody who knows a lot of people, but has no connection to them on any sort of emotional or spiritual level. It all really means nothing to him, and this is compared to a lot of times in the film where he'll be at a big party, there'll be lots of people around, women throwing themselves at him, every kind of drink he would desire, and then times where he's in the desert or on the beach, completely isolated by himself, completely contrasted to this world. And on one level, it's a very surface level idea of a character who is involved in this world but feels isolated and alone in it while having everything they could possibly want. But the way that Malick does it, I think, is what makes him set apart from the rest. I think Rick is such an interesting vessel for these other characters to kind of bounce off of, where because he has no real connection to these people, including his brother, played by Wes Bentley. I believe that was his brother in the film. They really have no connection. They feel totally isolated from one another. And truthfully, I forgot Brian Dennehy's relation to them. I don't think he was his father, but he was somebody who was not well, and Rick kind of sees a more raw version of presumably himself in that character of this character Joseph, who is seemingly disconnected mentally. Is the way that it seems. He's not in the film a whole ton, but it was really great to see him. It was fun when he popped up. I went, "Hey, that's Brian Dennehy, man. That's awesome." Malick's newer work will not be for everybody. I think there's a lot of valid criticisms against his filmmaking, and I've said before, maybe I haven't said before, that I'm truthfully not a big fan of improvisational film, and a lot of this film was improvised. According to, which it's always tricky to read any sort of IMDb trivia because you got to take it with a grain of salt. It says, although there was a script reported to be between 400 and 600 pages long, all of the scenes were improvised. And I imagine that there were beats that they tried to get to, but they gave the actors a lot of flowing rein. And improvisational, films that are primarily improvised are oftentimes ones that I have trouble really connecting to in a way. I think a filmmaker like John Cassavetes I find incredibly interesting and prolific, but oftentimes I find myself struggling to connect to his films because of that reason, where I feel that oftentimes his work to me becomes bloated and excessive, and I find myself almost completely uninterested. And that's not to say I'm not a fan of his work. Of course I am. Films of his like Opening Night, A Woman Under the Influence, Minnie and Moskowitz, I think are all terrific films. But some of his films like Husbands and Faces especially are films that I don't quite connect to for that reason. So it's totally subjective whether or not it'll work for you, and I don't know why it works for me here. And I think there might be, admittedly, some bias there, and I'm okay with admitting that, because The Tree of Life is a film that the last time I saw it, which was probably, I think about a year or so ago, I would say, it was a film that I had reacted incredibly strongly to, emotionally. And when I say that, I don't mean I was crying. When I say I had an emotional reaction, I mean, I did get teary-eyed, of course. But it's a film that connected with me on a very personal level, made me reflect on my own life and my own choices, and I think that when a film does that, it goes beyond just being a favorite film. It goes to this other higher level of a film that it's something more to you. So I think knowing that, I'm willing, and having that mindset of what kind of film this will be, I think I was able to ease myself more to a film like this, which is why I bring up Cassavetes, because his films, when they don't work for me, I find myself unintentionally perhaps a little more apprehensive with his other work, and ultimately when it works out, it's great, and I find myself, truthfully, I remember when I first watched Opening Night, knowing that it was 2.5 hours, knowing that Cassavetes, to me, had a tendency to overstay his welcome, I was apprehensive and didn't really think I'd like it as much as I did. And then I watched the film, and it's terrific, and it's one of his best films, in my opinion. So I think there's a bias there that with anyone, if you're going to see a brand new film and it's one of your favorite filmmakers, even if you know the reception of the film, whether or not it's been critically applauded or critically what's the word I'm looking for? Critically thrashed. That's not the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. Forgive me, it's now 9:40 and I'm still waking up. But that bias there of having your opinion swayed one way or another, I think we all want to maybe believe sometimes we have no bias going into a film. And maybe that's true for some, maybe that's not true for others, but ultimately, at the end of the day, there is some expectation, I truly believe, no matter what. I mean, if I watched a brand new Terrence Malick film and it was like this, and I had no idea what it was about, I had no idea. Basically, I had no knowledge of it. I sat down and you put the film in front of me. I could be watching anything. I could be watching the next big action film or the next horror film, and then I see a film. Like, say I see a film like this, I would go, okay, that's a Malick film. so I'm going to have my opinion swayed in a way. And for those who weren't a fan of his recent work, maybe they're going to react differently to these films. They're going to say that they know what to expect, and there's a lot of valid criticisms there, and that's fine. But I'm aware that my perhaps I have some bias there, which is ultimately what I'm getting at. And one thing I wanted to mention earlier, which is somewhat off topic, but I mentioned a documentary that he did, that he produced called Awaken, and that was one I was thinking of, but what I was actually thinking of was Voyage of Time, which was an IMAX documentary, which I have not seen. I'm really bummed, man. I should talk about IMAX one of these episodes, how much I love it. The closest IMAX, both of them were victims of the pandemic, and the closest one to me now is attached to a Cinemark, and I only went there once to see Christopher Nolan's Tenet, and which was phenomenal. The film itself and the experience. But it wasn't a true IMAX. It was connected to a cinema, but I've only seen a couple of documentaries in IMAX in 3D. And let me tell you, man, if you get the opportunity, do yourself a favor, take the time out and go see it. It is truly an unbelievable experience. But now I'm going off topic. Anyways, this was a film that I just completely loved. It was totally for me. Minor problems would probably be that I do think that at times it does tend to go on for a bit long. At times, the overall film I thought was fairly paced, but which is funny saying a film that doesn't really have a clear narrative direction. I still thought didn't feel too long, but apparently at the time of the recording this, which I forgot to mention before, I was watching this film, and I was like, man, it's been a couple years since Malick has made a film, which is kind of funny, seeing as how he used to take much more time with his films in between. And I was looking up on IMDb, and I was wondering what his next work was. And apparently, his next work is in post-production. A film called The Way of the Wind, which IMDb calls a retelling of several episodes in the life of Christ, with Mark Rylance, who I just saw in The Phantom of the Open. I talked about that a little while ago. Which I should say, since I've talked about that film, I've actually really I really like that film more and more. It's actually, I think I may have said that before, I don't remember. But it's actually one of my favorites of the year. Terrific film, and I saw it pop up on VOD now, so you get a chance, you can check it out. And Ben Kingsley's in the film as well, and Matthias Schoenaerts, I don't know how to say his name, but he's an actor I've seen a bunch, and I'm very much looking forward to this, and I really don't know why I have taken this long to see his other work. I missed A Hidden Life theatrically. It played, and for whatever reason, I just, it's one of these things where I don't know why I didn't go see it. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if you feel that Knight of Cups will be a film that will be for you, I say give it a watch. If not, it's totally up to you. It's in the eye of the beholder. And if you're unfamiliar with Malick's films, and maybe you're only familiar with his style and types of films and since 2011, don't write them off, because his earlier films are all terrific. I haven't seen The New World, but Badlands, The Thin Red Line, and especially Days of Heaven are three terrific films, and although The Thin Red Line did not make my top 10 of 1998, it is a very, very good film, and recommended, and has a Criterion, as well as, actually, Badlands, Days of Heaven, Days of Heaven's out of print now, but Badlands, Days of Heaven, The Thin Red Line, The New World, and The Tree of Life all have Criterions. Days of Heaven is also readily available from a Paramount Blu-ray, so these are all readily available, and who knows, maybe we'll get some more down the line. I wouldn't mind seeing a Criterion of Knight of Cups, and that'd be really great. But as always, guys, I had a list of topics to talk about, and I didn't get to any other ones, but that's alright. I still have some time left, so we'll wrap it up a little bit. I watched this on Tubi in nice HD, and Tubi is free. I think most people probably know that service. It does have some ads, but overall it's not too bad, and they have they are nice enough not to be totally what's the word I'm looking for? Surprising with the ads. They at least give you a heads up, which is nice. They somewhat planned it, I believe. At least they at least wait till the end of a scene to give you an ad or a couple ads. But it's free, so you can't really complain. I don't. I would love to see some of these films at 4K. The Tree of Life has a Criterion Blu-ray with two different versions on there, but that was a regular Blu-ray and no 4K, unfortunately. And I should say, with The Tree of Life, I have not watched the longer version, which I think is just all the footage. I could be wrong about that, but I believe that I read that Malick prefers the theatrical version of that film, which is the one that I went with when it came to rewatching it, because I did not want to watch a new version if I was trying to revisit something, if you know what I mean. I could see myself watching the longer version just for comparison's sake, but I think that the version that we have is perfect as is. I don't really know what else you could add to include in the film. I would assume maybe more stuff in the first half in terms of the history of time and the relationships in time. I really don't know. But yeah, that's a film that's just truly one of my favorite films. Absolutely love that film, and it's just great to see Malick back doing more films again. But anyways, that's all I have for this episode. Like I said, hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all using these days wisely, not wasting them with meaningless social interaction, hanging around, staring at walls, and then wondering what happened. Unless that's what you want to do, then God bless you, you know? It is no one's right to tell you how to live your life as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else. So if you want to spend your days working nonstop or playing nonstop, it is your prerogative, and as long as you're happy, you've already succeeded. And I know I am getting plenty of work done, getting plenty of reading done. The writing is going terrifically. What I'm working on now is coming along so nicely, man. I'm reading it back and going, man, this is making it all worth it. You know, I was working on something and I was hitting a bit of a wall. I was stuck on this one part, and I just came back to it about a day or so later and went back, and then propelled me forward. And that's how we get the work done, man. One step at a time, one word at a time, one letter at a time. All right, guys, I'm going to cut it off here. I will see you next week, and I hope you tune in for another episode. Hopefully, I will not be recording it at 9:48 in the morning, where I have to keep my voice lower, which sounds like an ASMR video. But I hope this was relaxing in a way. All right, that's all I got, guys. All the best.